This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Agitavach Matzoi Shabbos. Tonight is the night before the day that we observe the fast of the 17th of Tammuz. This year, tomorrow is the 18th of Tammuz. And the Shabbos in the Parsha that we read immediately before Shiva Tammuz is always Balak. And the question is, why is Balak the Parsha we read before Shiva Tammuz? What's the connection between Shiva Tammuz, the 3 weeks, and Parshas Balak? And why was Balak Zoiche to have a Parsha named after him? I mean, the Chazal tell us in the Yalkut that the reason why Sefer Ezra is not called by the name Nehemiah is because, even though he wrote it, is because he took credit for himself. And we should have a Parsha named after a Rasha, Balak. You know, even Parshas Koirach, the Reb Chaim Falaji was careful not to call it Koirach. So why would we call it Balak? And Rav Moshe Wolfson in the Amunas Itecha on Parshas Balak offers as follows. And this is an idea that we've developed between the connection between the 3 weeks and the Tzmicha and the Leda of the Malchus Beis David. Firstly, the Chassam Sofer has a cheshbon that Boaz took Rus the night of the 17th of Tammuz, and which means Oived was conceived Shiva Asar Tammuz. On Tisha B'Av, that's the Leda of Mashiach. So that means these days, even though on the surface they're days of tragedy, but bepnimius, behind the outer shell, they are latent with nuclear spiritual energy and power of redemption. Because the concept is, the holier something is, the more coating and covering and layers try to conceal it. So we have the concept of the bris ois bris kodesh, which is concealed by the arla. The higher something is, the more elevated something is, the more coated it is. We find that Eretz Yisrael, before it was conquered by Bnei Yisrael, it was coated and covered by the Canaanim that lived there, and the Amalekim around it. The greater, the more gavaya something is, the more it's covered, like the thorns that surround the rose. And therefore, these days, the 3 weeks, they're elevated days. These are days that are inherently Yom Tovim, and they will turn into a Yom Tov. Shiva Asar Tammuz, Aaron HaKohen says, Chag Lashem Machar, the Chida points out. In the future, in the far-off future, will be a Yom Tov. Tisha B'Av is a moyed of the future. But right now, it's mechusa. But something that's coated and covered, if you dig deep down, you could find the latent Kedusha. So the Pasuk says, Kol roi defeha. The Svarim tell us, from the Maggid of Kushnitz, Kol roi defeha, Kol roi defka, anyone who pursues God. Kol roi defeha hi sigua bein hametzarim. You could find God in these days, particularly the way we understand it. The Rebbeinu Shalom is found more in these days, but you have to look, you have to dig deeper. That is the connection between Balak and the 3 weeks. Balak is the paradigm of the outer coating that contains within it great Kedusha. The spark of David HaMelech is latent in Balak. Through Balak came Eglain, came Rus, and came David HaMelech. And Balak knew that, and he wanted to destroy that. Rabbi Moshe Wolfson teaches. He explains, he interprets, L'cha ara li Yaakov. Curse the Yaakov in me. Curse that spark of Kedusha in me. But ultimately, he let it out. The Balak is the progenitor of the Mashiach ben David. So the idea, the concept of the 3 weeks, is that it is a time coating over latent Kedusha, which is the theme of Balak. And because of that Kedusha that's latent in Balak, we cannot ignore him. We cannot push him away. We name it Balak because, yes, in him, he was not able to curse the Li Yaakov, L'cha ara li Yaakov. And this is an appropriate reading for Parshas Balak. And as we pointed out in the past, Bilam's point, his vantage point of cursing Klal Yisrael, Vayashas el Hamidbar Panav, Rashi says Ketarguma. Look in the Targum. The Targum says he looked toward the Chet HaEgel, which of course was created on Shiva Asar Tammuz. So Balak is really the proper introduction to the 3 weeks and sets the theme for this idea that this is a time of great Kedusha. It's just coded over, and if we dig and we search, we'll be able to find Hashem, Kol Roi Defeha, Hisiguha, Ben HaMitzarim. Wishing everyone an easy fast.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.